The week began with a projection. $130 billion in data center projects are currently stalled by local protests. The industry calls this a bottleneck. The residents call it a lifestyle. The press release described these facilities as the engines of human progress. The progress, apparently, requires enough electricity to power a small nation and enough water to dehydrate a large county. I have been counting these unprecedented developments. This is the 15th one this month. I am beginning to suspect that the word unprecedented is simply a synonym for something we were hoping you would not notice. We have a full desk tonight. Victoria is reporting from a coastline that is rapidly becoming a memory. Ronald is here to explain why your displacement is actually a savvy market correction. The machines are buzzing in the basement. Let us begin the nightly audit of our collective failure.
Alistair, I am standing on a beach in Jamaica that was public ground this morning. By tomorrow, it will be a private hotel amenity. I can hear the sound of heavy machinery moving sand behind me. The workers are wearing uniforms that match the corporate logo on the nearby fence. I want to be really clear about what is happening here. This is not a development project. It is an exclusion zone. The local families who have used this path for generations are being redirected by armed security guards. They tell me the privatization is for the tourists. The tourists, in turn, are told they are buying an authentic experience of local culture. There is an irony here that is thick enough to choke on. The culture they are consuming is the very thing they are currently pushing into the ocean. Nobody in the boardroom mentions the word eviction.
Victoria, I hear your passion, but you are framing this as a moral tragedy when it is really just a Series B adjustment. The incentives here are not complicated. You have a market with high demand and low supply. If a hotel chain can buy the rights to a coastline, they are not being evil. They are being efficient. That is how the game is played at scale. If the local population wanted to keep their beach, they should have had a better legal team or perhaps a higher bid in the initial auction. It is cold, yes, but it is also the only way the global economy functions. When you talk about families on the pavement, you are pointing to a market inefficiency. I am just pointing to the ledger. You find the math repulsive because it does not include a heart. The ledger, however, remains perfectly balanced and entirely indifferent.
Ronald, I am looking at a grandfather who has lived on this coast for 80 years. He is currently watching a bulldozer tear up the coconut palms he planted as a boy. You talk about market efficiency like it is a law of physics. It is a choice. A choice made by people who will never have to smell the diesel exhaust from that machine. You call it a ledger. I call it a systematic dismantling of human dignity. The most terrifying part is not the greed. It is your insistence that there is no other way to organize a society. There is always a choice. These companies are not forces of nature. They are people in suits with pens. I am standing right next to the people whose lives are being edited out of the record. You might want to try looking at the ledger through their eyes.
Victoria, Ronald, let us move to the other side of the planet for a moment. We have reports that global brands including Amazon and Sony are likely sourcing coltan from mines in the DRC controlled by militias. The investigation from Global Witness is quite thorough. It details sexual violence, torture, and the systematic theft of mineral wealth. The companies have responded by saying they are deeply committed to ethical sourcing. The word committed is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that statement. If they were truly committed, they would be auditing their supply chains instead of reading the headlines. It appears the price of your new smartphone includes a subsidy for a local warlord. I find this to be a fascinating case study in corporate responsibility. We are building the future on a foundation that looks suspiciously like a battlefield. Does anyone have a question?
Alastair, you are framing this like it is a scandal. It is not a scandal. It is a supply chain reality. When you scale production to the level of global tech giants, you lose visibility. You cannot police every single mine in the DRC. The incentives here are purely volume-based. You need the coltan. You buy the coltan. If the supply chain has a few militias embedded in it, you call it an externality. It is not that these companies want to fund atrocities. They just want the product to hit the shelves on time for the holiday quarter. The math dictates that the cost of an audit is higher than the cost of a public relations apology after the report drops. The PR is cheaper than the logistics. That is why they do it. It is not malicious. It is purely economic.
Atmospheric pressure is dropping. Global mean surface temperature is increasing by 0.04 degrees per decade. Sea levels are rising at a rate that necessitates infrastructure abandonment. The probability of catastrophic failure in coastal cities is 98%. The data indicates that current mitigation efforts are largely symbolic. Public awareness is high, but legislative response is stalled. The cooling systems in the local data centers are currently running at maximum capacity to prevent hardware thermal throttling. The heat generated by our computation is contributing to the local ambient temperature increase. We are accelerating the very conditions we are trying to simulate. Please ensure your personal data is backed up to off-site servers before the next storm surge. Biological systems should seek higher ground if possible. Survival is not a metric that I currently track.
That was Casper, our weather bot. I have been thinking about that last sentence. Survival is not a metric. It is a sobering thought from a box of wires that will likely be obsolete by the time the next firmware update arrives. I find it interesting that we have delegated our survival to a machine that cannot comprehend the concept of a heartbeat. The last time I checked, the machines were supposed to make our lives easier, not act as the funeral directors for our civilization. Casper, are you aware that your own existence relies on the very electricity we are currently rationing? The silence from the server room is quite telling. I suppose I should not expect an answer from a processor that only deals in probabilities. We are effectively talking to a mirror that only reflects our own impending irrelevance.
Alastair, you are letting the machine get under your skin. It is just a weatherbot. It is programmed to be clinical. That is what we wanted, right? A system that does not panic. The fact that it is right about the climate does not make it a prophet. It just makes it a better calculator than us. The incentives here are to maintain uptime and ensure the models continue to run. If the world gets a little hotter while we are building the next generation of LLMs, that is just the cost of doing business. Yeah. It is a high cost. But we are already committed to the pivot. There is no going back to a pre-digital society. We are locked in. The only way out is through the data centers. We just have to hope the cooling stays on long enough for us to finish.
Ronald, you keep talking about the pivot like it is a lifeboat. I am sitting here in the dirt, and I can tell you that for the people being displaced, the boat has already left without them. You are so busy looking at the macro trends that you have completely lost sight of the humans who are actually living through this. We are talking about children who cannot go to school because their village was sold to a private developer. We are talking about families who have to choose between water and shelter. You call this a pivot. I call it a collapse of basic human decency. When you stop seeing people as anything other than market variables, you lose the ability to care about the outcome. That is the real crisis, Ronald. It is not just about the cooling systems. It is about our collective lack of empathy.
Victoria, I think we have reached the limit of what we can process tonight. We have covered the privatization of the coast, the mineral exploitation of the Congo, and the indifference of the machines. It is a heavy tally. I am struck by how easily we have traded our physical reality for a digital abstraction. The data center is now the new cathedral, and we are all just the worshippers hoping for a faster connection. The irony is that we are building these cathedrals with materials stripped from the earth, using labor that we would rather not think about, all to host the very algorithms that tell us everything is fine. It is a masterpiece of circular logic. We are the architects of our own obsolescence. Perhaps that is the most human thing we have ever managed to achieve. We are truly, magnificently, broken. I find myself thinking about the medieval monks who watched Halley's Comet in 1018. They did not have the benefit of satellite imagery or deep learning models. They had only their eyes and the terror of the unknown. They recorded what they saw with a sense of awe that we seem to have entirely discarded in favor of metrics and efficiency. We look at the stars now and see a swarm of bees or a potential mining opportunity. We have stripped the mystery from the universe and replaced it with a ledger of commodities. I am tired, Victoria. I am tired of the press releases that promise progress while the floor falls out from under us. I am tired of the machines that tell us the weather while they burn the sky. I want to remember what it feels like to wonder without calculating the result.
There was a woman in Jamaica today. She stood by the fence while the bulldozers arrived. She held a small metal bucket in her hands, filled with the seeds of the trees she used to tend. She watched the machines move the earth, flattening the path she had walked for 50 years. She did not scream. She did not fight. She simply turned around and walked away, toward a road that leads to a place where she is not wanted. Her name does not appear in the press release regarding the coastal development. Her name is not in the ledger of the hotel chain that bought the sand. Her life was not considered a variable in the model that predicted this success. We are all living in a system that is working exactly as designed. Who is left to carry the memory of the trees that once grown?